let's get on to the main event, which is the remote work workflow featuring GitHub. However, before we can do much with GitHub, we do have a few initial steps we have to go through. If you don't already have an account, you need to go ahead and sign up. If you already have an account, well, then you need to sign in. So what is GitHub? GitHub is basically a hosting service for hosting Git repositories. It also has additional features that either augment using Git or are in some way in support of Git. There are a few features that aren't related per se, but are good for project management. It is a fairly common misconception that Git and GitHub are the same thing, and they're not. GitHub is a hosting service, and Git itself is the source control tool. The GitHub service offers unlimited free public repositories at the free level. And because of this, it's become one of the most popular Git hosting platforms out there. GitHub is available at github.com. And then I'll walk you through the steps on signing in and signing up. You will need to have an email address you can access because you will need to verify or validate your email. I walked through the sign-up process a little earlier. When you first start out and go to the GitHub website, right on the homepage, you can sign up for an account if you don't already have one. Just fill out the username, email, and password. Pretty much in real time, GitHub will validate that your desired username is available or not. Once you've done that, click on the green Sign Up for GitHub button. Then you'll be greeted on another page. Now, I will say one thing, and that is that I don't have any control over the GitHub website, and GitHub does have a tendency of changing things on a fairly frequent basis. So if the next few screens look a little different, then that means they made an update. Right now, I'm greeted with a verified account page, so I simply click on the green Create an Account, which takes me to the next Welcome screen. At this point, I technically have an account. By default, I'm given the free account, but I'm also given the option to upgrade to the developer account, basically a paid account. The difference here is that the paid account allows you to create private repositories, but we don't need that for this course. The free account will be perfectly fine. As part of the sign-up process, you may be asked a series of questions like a survey. You can answer them if you want, or you can skip this page. At some point, you'll be emailed a verification email. I have an example of the one that I got. Make sure you click on the link or copy it and paste it into your browser to verify your account. When you do that, you should get a screen that looks like this, where it says that your email was verified. This unlocks various features on GitHub. All right, now let's do the demo. Here I'm on my Windows machine, and I'm going to go to my web browser. As I mentioned before, I use Google Chrome as my standard, since it's consistent across all the platforms I support. I'm going to go to github.com, and once that page loads, I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Once you're signed in, you'll land on your dashboard. Now, in the future, this dashboard may change because GitHub's always changing things, because they're already beta testing the next version of the dashboard. However, from here, we're going to go ahead and create our new repository. So click on the green New Repository button, and that takes us to the Create New Repository page. We should have our username already populated as the owner, and we need to provide a repository name. I recommend using all lowercase with words separated by dashes. That's that's just a naming convention that I like using, but you can come up with your own. What's great is the web form here will automatically convert unsupported characters. For example, if you tried using spaces, it would convert them to dashes instead. This repository name just has to be unique for your account. I'm going to use GitHub-Demo. Description is optional, but I like filling it out. This is a test repository for demonstrating how to use GitHub. Moving along, we are by default set to public, which you want to keep. Now, if you want to, we can try out private, and we are prompted to upgrade our account. We don't really need a private account. It really doesn't matter if the whole world can see hello world. The last little bit here is the important piece. We want to initialize this repository with a README. So check that box. Now the rest of this is not anything that we need to care about right now. So we can double check the form, and if everything looks fine, then we click on the green Create Repository button. Great. We should land on a page that looks like this. Of course, you'll have a different name up here because it should be your account instead of this one right here. We'll have our README file that we allowed GitHub to create on our behalf, and we start out with an initial commit. We have one commit that's right here, so we can click on that and see it. We can always click on the Code tab to get back to the main page of our repository. By default, we get a master branch. That's the default branch that you get with Git repositories. We can also see that by clicking on the branch item. You can see that it is set to default. All right, so we have successfully logged into GitHub and created our first repository on the GitHub hosting service. Now we're ready to do some things on the local side. Now that we have our repository set up on the remote side, let's switch context and go local. I want to keep my browser available, so I'm going to keep it open like that. And I'm going to fire up my terminal program. Now on Windows, it'll be git bash, but if you're on Linux or Mac, it'll be the terminal program. I like to orient my windows such that I have easy access to both my terminal program and my web browser, because I'll be going back and forth. When I first log in, I should land in my user's home directory. We can double check that with the pwd command. That is print working directory. And in git bash, the way that it represents where we are, it uses the Unix style, and the way it handles the different drives that we're accustomed to on Windows, it prefaces that with a /drive name, /c, then the path, /user/JSON, which is my name. I can see a list of files and folders here by using the ls command. ls is equivalent to the dir command if you're familiar with Windows. When starting out, I like to make sure that I group all my projects together in a single folder underneath my user's home directory. I typically call that folder projects. So let's make that directory now. mkdir, that's make directory, and then the directory I want to create, which is projects. Now if I do ls, I should now have a projects folder that I can go into. Now every so often I'm going to use the clear command to clear my screen for better viewing. Now let's go into that directory, cd, that is change directory, and into the projects folder. I'll also use the term folder and directory interchangeably. People coming from Windows are probably more familiar with the term folder, and those coming from Mac or Linux are probably more familiar with the term directory. For the most part, they mean the same thing. Yes, there are some very technical differences, but they're so minor it's not worth even bothering with it. All right, now that we're here, use pwd. You can see that I'm in the projects folder or directory underneath my user's home directory. At this location is where I want to create the copy of my remote repository. In order to do that, we're going to use a process called cloning. So we go back to our Git repository on GitHub. We go over here and see clone or download. We expand that out, and we see clone with HTTPS, which is what we want. You can select the entire text here and copy. That will copy to your clipboard. Or you can use the nice little button here that's a copy the clipboard button. Once you do that, let's head back over to our terminal program, and you can right-click and paste in the value, or if you're on Git Bash, you can use the shortcut key, Shift Insert. But first, I need to type git clone, and then use Shift Insert to paste in that URL. Once you've done that, press Enter. Now, since it's a public repository, we weren't required to authenticate. Let's look at our projects folder to see what we have. Type ls, and we should now have a GitHub-Demo folder within projects. By default, the git clone command will create a project folder named after the repository. Let's go into that using the cd command. So now if I do a pwd, you can see that I'm within the GitHub-Demo folder underneath projects. You also notice that when we switched into the GitHub-Demo folder, since it's being managed by Git, my prompt changed just a little bit. Now in parenthesis, it shows master, and that's the branch I'm currently on. And since we are currently in a Git managed folder, we can use our Git commands that are related to the repository. The first one, let's look at status. If you type git status, then press enter. The git status command tells us what the current state of our working folder is relative to our repository, and if applicable, related to the remote repository. So we see that we're on the master branch, and that our branch is up to date with origin/master. Now, origin/master simply is a reference to the remote repository's branch master. That is, our repository on GitHub. Whenever we cloned our repository, we got the remote reference named origin set up for us for free. And our master branch on our local repository is tracking against the master branch on GitHub. Furthermore, we have nothing to commit because we haven't done anything yet, and that our working tree, that is our working directory and anything recursively down from here, is all clean. Like there's no pending changes, no updates, anything like that Git is aware of. All right, while I'm here, let's look at the files that we have that are part of this repository. Now, I've been using the ls command, but I also have another alias called ll. That is another way of doing the ls command. So I've defined the ll command to basically be the equivalent of typing ls with the -a and -l options. If I do that, I get that output. It's just another way of listing my files and folders in this directory. And if I type ll, I should get basically the same type of content. So we just created our project folder and cloned our repository into that location, and then took a little look around. Now let's look at the Git repository. So listing out all the files and folders, we have the README file that we have, which is the same README file that we got for free when we created our repository. It's simply a markdown file, which is why we have the .md extension. And GitHub, by default, will render it for us. However, there's one difference here. The only entry that we have listed here is the README file. But if we go back to our local system, we see that we have that .git folder. As I mentioned before, the .git folder is where the Git repository actually resides. So looking at my illustration here, the working directory is the directory we're currently in. That contains any files or folders that are part of our project that's being managed by Git. Then within the root directory of our project, we have our .git folder, which is the actual repository. That contains all the files and all the revisions of the files that's being tracked by Git. Let's go into the Git repository folder, cd git, and you can see that when we go into the .git folder, that our prompt changes to warn us that we're in the Git directory. And it does that because really, we have no major business here. It is technically a series of files and folders, so we can do an ll and see that we have a grouping of files and folders. All of this makes up the internals of the Git repository. Now I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to do cd space ... That allows me to go back up a level. So now I'm back in the GitHub-demo working folder of our repository.